What is outsider music? There have been a lot of definitions throughout the years, but to me, outsider music is characterized by being unorthodox in almost every aspect. From the singing,
Chronic schizophrenia, chronic schizophrenia, chronic schizophrenia,
to the instrumentation, to the lyrics. It's mainly the result of an unparalleled drive to create a sincere musical expression by these untrained, self-taught musicians, who are not thinking of what people will say about them, which is something that I really admire, even if there are some whose output is too out there for me to enjoy. When I was going through my exploration of this genre, there were a lot of stories that I found very interesting, and some of them might even end up in future videos. But there was one specifically that I just knew I had to make a video about. So here it is. If you were walking down the Sunset Strip in Los Angeles in 1968, it was likely that you would end up being approached by an enthusiastic young man with messy hair. He would ask you one single question.
So would you like to hear an original song for a dime? I swear to God it's original.
You would be forgiven to think that this was just another homeless person. And you would be correct, since this man was indeed homeless at that time. However, this person would end up having a more interesting life story than most people would probably think as he sang to them in the strip. With the help of some key figures around him, he would be able to turn this situation around, at least for a short while becoming a recognizable figure in the underground music world, who got to hang out with some of the industry's biggest names. But sadly, at the end of the day, his demons were far too strong for him to control them, and he ended up sabotaging his own career due to them. Still, his interesting legacy remains, so join me as we explore the life of Larry Wild Man Fischer, the godfather of outsider music.
somber mood inside the hospital.
Lawrence Wayne Fisher was born on November 6, 1944, in Los Angeles, California. Turmoil started from a very young age, when his father passed away, leaving his mother alone to take care of her 4 children, which is something that overwhelmed her. At the same time, it was becoming clear that Larry's behavior was a bit out of the ordinary. He had a compulsion for singing, no matter the time or the place, which he would call pep. This behavior would infuriate his mother. His brother David said the following regarding Larry as a child. I don't recall he had any other things to do other than his singing. He didn't seem to have any favorite toys or things like that. He kept to himself in his room, didn't talk much, he was just extremely lonely and lost. His family could not deal with his antics, and so to them, he would become a burden more than anything, especially to his mother, who treated him differently from her other kids, making him do things like forcing him to eat on the sink, while the other kids ate at the kitchen table. This gave Larry a lifelong hatred of his mother, and he could be heard saying often that his mother didn't love him. This culminated in 1963, when he came after his mother with a knife. Following this, he was committed to a mental institution, where he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He never had any contact with his mother ever again. After running away in 1964, he lived out of the hospital for a while, even after being found out. In this period of time, he met R&B legend Solomon Burke, who was the one that gave him the nickname of Wild Man, and encouraged him to not give up on his dream. In 1966, he was committed again. Once he was released in 1968, he was told that he would never be allowed to live in the house where he grew up again. And that's when he started living on the street, and he also started singing songs on Sunset Strip for a dime. One of the people that saw Larry on the Sunset Strip was none other than Frank Zappa. Intrigued by the man and by his musical originality, he realized he wanted to make an album with Larry, and so he signed him to his newly founded label, Bizarre Records. In 1969, An Evening with Wild Man Fischer was released. The album cover consisting of Larry pointing a knife at a cardboard cutout posing as his mother. Another indicator of his mental instability and of his hatred for his mother. Afterwards, he went on tour to promote the record with relative success. However, after the tour was over, he found out that the record only sold 12,000 copies, and he was furious. You see, Larry was obsessed with trying to become famous, and had an idea of how successful the record would end up being that simply didn't correspond to reality. While Zappa thought the record would sell some copies, Larry assumed it would sell millions of them. When confronting Zappa about the record's success, Larry threw a bottle that nearly hit Zappa's daughter, Moon Unit. This made Zappa see how dangerous Larry could be, and he decided he wanted nothing to do with him anymore, thus ending his stint with Bizarre Records.
My sweet little Kathy, she's sweeter than taffy. I love her.
After parting ways with Frank Zappa, Larry gave up on his dreams of being a rock star, and between 1969 and 1977 had a series of odd jobs that he was repeatedly fired from. But then one day, he went into a newly founded label called Rhino Records, where he was recognized. They asked Larry if he could produce a jingle for a record label, and he consented. The label was so happy with the output that they decided to release the song as a single. What then happened was that on the other side of the Atlantic, one of the most influential figures of 20th century music heard the song and started playing it in his radio shows. His name was John Peel, and he definitely deserves his own video, which I'll probably make at one point. This resurgence resulted in the second LP released in 1977 by Rhino Records called Wild Mania. After that, Barnes & Barnes came onto the picture. They were a musical duo, a comedic one at that, consisting of Bill Mumy and Robert Heimer, and they were really into the music of Wild Man Fischer, and so they produced his last two records, Pronounced Normal and Nothing Scary, in 1981 and 1983 respectively. After Pronounced Normal, he had a paranoid episode in which he thought the musical arrangements made by Barnes & Barnes were making threats on his life. And so he concocted this conspiracy in his mind that they, alongside Weird Al Yankovic and a radio broadcaster called Dr. Demento, were trying to kill him. Eventually, he was persuaded that it wasn't the case, and Barnes & Barnes, incredibly, still recorded another record with him. After both records were released, Larry would still record a duet with Rosemary Clooney in 1986, that being the final output of his recording career. For the next decade and a half, he would live in motels or on the street. In the early 2000s, a documentary about Larry called Derailroaded began being filmed, but in 2003, while filming was still taking place, a man was shot and killed in the hotel Larry was staying at. This resulted in a 6-month-long paranoid episode where he resorted to living on the street again. Eventually, Larry showed up at his aunt's house, who convinced him to live with her. Unfortunately, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer just 3 weeks later. Due to her need for care, Larry, as well as his family, consented to his commitment to an assisted living facility in 2004. There, he was prescribed medication to deal with his schizophrenia, which controlled his behavior but he eliminated his creative tendencies. The pep that he possessed throughout his whole life was now gone. He lived in this facility until his death in 2011. He was 66 years old. And this was the story of Wild Man Fischer. It is quite a sad tale of an individual's dreams being sapped away due to his mental health issues, and hopefully this video helps in preserving his legacy. Also, I know I've mentioned it before, but if you are interested in knowing more about Wild Man Fischer, check out the Railroaded documentary. It's really well put together. And that's it. Don't forget to like, it really helps out the channel, and subscribe for more docs like this one. My name is Joe Fiki Fiki, and I'll see you later on with another video. Bye bye.
In my room. In my room.